Hello, kids. All right, so I'm still figuring out. I got some new fancy light for this little at-home studio thing that we have going, and it's kind of creeping me out. It's super bright, and I feel like my eyes look like I'm possessed, which actually is perfect for this week's card. So I'm just going to jump right into it, and I pulled from the Mystical Shaman Oracle deck. And I pulled the card, the Sorcerer. I mean, the Sorcerer's eyeballs are kind of like mine, like possessed. Like they have those spiral things going through them. Not really, but anyway. So the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer is a symbolism of like dark power, like dark magic. And so it represents the destructive aspect of our psyche, our ability to be very self-centered, and like different behaviors that can harm others. So it can be unconscious beliefs that we're acting from. It could be any kind of ideas that lead to separation, conflict, or even like acting from a scarcity mindset. And so in a way, it's like our ego, and it is like the Sorcerer has power. So if you think about like the power that our ego can have, I'm sure we can all think of a person or two where they have a lot of power, but it's all coming from ego. And so that would be like, we don't call it that, but like that's kind of the archetype of a sorcerer. So, clearly that's not good. So then there's this invitation that comes with it. And so when this enters our life, when the sorcerer gets pulled, then it's just a reminder to look at our own beliefs about maybe something like scarcity or like self-centered fear can manifest and be impacting our life. So a lot of times, like when we are self-centered, when we are acting that way, it can, like for a lot of people, it feels like narcissistic in a way, and yet it can be from an insecurity of there not being enough. And so let's look at like COVID, when we were all hoarding toilet paper, and how like it was the scarcity that made people self-centered, and how that can be like the underlying thing, that scarcity mindset. So then this card is asking us to really take a good look at ourselves and ask ourselves, like, what part of us is misusing our power? Or what part of us is harboring different feelings of maybe resentment, greed, bigotry, or hatred? And it's okay. So this is what I think tends to happen when like a message like this gets pulled, is I feel like, and I'm going to speak for myself because I've noticed this, is I feel like I'm a very loving and accepting person, and that, and I try my best to like act from there and to put good into this world. And so I try to keep myself in check. So then when I hear something like this, I almost feel like, oh, that's for somebody else. And that's a problem, because I also have an ego. We all do. If we're alive on this earth, we are part human, so we come from unconscious things. And so it takes me to step up in vulnerability and bravery to see like, no, what part of this really does speak to me, because there are ways where I might be acting out of resentment, vengeance, lust, greed, bigotry, and hatred. And that's the part that we don't want to look at. We want to think like that's other people, and that's not going to solve anything. And we can see this in our world right now. And if we would all stop and look at the ways that we're putting this out into the world, and I'd like to think that maybe mine isn't like outwardly putting a ton of damage in, but it is in some levels. And so I have to be willing to look at that. And if everyone could step forward and do that, then that's where we could have like this real transformational shift. But we have to be willing to do that. So I can recognize in myself my immediate tendency to want to deflect this and assume it's for other people. And yet that's part of the problem. That's part of the sorcery of my ego thinking, no, it's not me. I don't do those things. And I have to understand where that's coming from so that I don't deflect it. There's still work for me to do. So I can recognize that that's my tendency and then release it so that I can still do the internal work of the sorcery. And what's great about it is that if I can reflect and I can see where maybe I am putting harm on some level out into this world or to others or whatever situations, there's still time to correct it. Like it's not all is lost. It's like when we do that, we forget the divine nature of who we are and how interconnected we all are. And so then it's just an opportunity to stop and remember that interconnection, that unity, see like love in other people and to give them love if you're like in conflict with someone or in a situation, so that we can infuse that back into our lives so we can act from that place of wholeness instead of this sorcery of resentment, vengeance, lust, greed, or bigotry. And so the sorcerer comes to challenge our thinking. It's like a, hey, look at me, I'm here, now what are you going to do about it? And so we, with this second chance, basically, then we get to course correct. We get to choose something different and also no longer blame other people for like any darkness that resides inside of us. So that can be easy, especially if we've been truly a victim of someone else's sorcery. And so then, but this is where we see that generational issue, or where like the different archetypes of the victim and the perpetrator, how they can just cycle through. Because if you've been a victim, then you might take on the role of the perpetrator, and it just continues to go in this cycle of dysfunction, and it is, no one gets healed that way. And the way that we heal it is we have to take responsibility for the darkness inside of us, whether we put it there or not. That's not saying that what happened was okay. It's just saying like, how much are we going to let this sorcerer have a hold of our lives? Because it's not going, in the long run, in the short term, it's not doing what's best for us. So then we can do different work like forgiveness work or acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It doesn't mean that what happened was okay. It means we're not resisting reality any longer. Last week's card was the seer, and just seeing things clearly, and how like there's such a healing element to that where we can then move forward. So it's almost like this builds off of that. So last week maybe we're seeing things a little clearly, but now we have to be able to course correct and to see like where we can choose another way, even if it's something that's like this sorcerer energy is coming from a wound of some sort. And that is our responsibility to pay attention to that, so that we're not hurting other people and creating wounds for others. And so that was kind of deep, but it is a reality that I mean we see it right now, and maybe it's always been there. Probably it just seems like right now we're just in a very divisive time, and it doesn't have to be that way. But we can't start by pointing fingers at other people. We have to take accountability for our part in bringing that in. And you can still be an activist. You can still be, fighting for a cause. I don't know that I like the word fighting, but working towards a cause. But is it coming from the sorcerer energy, or is it coming from a place of wholeness and love? And there's a big difference when we can really sort through that. Then the intention for this week, find time at some point to just sit and to think about what ways are sorcerer energy coming through you? In what way are we acting out of resentment, greed, jealousy, lust, hatred, bigotry? How are we contributing to the problem? Might not be easy, but again, it's necessary. And then how can we correct it? How can we make it better? And then ask yourself, what kind of work, what kind of things do we need to do in order to realign ourselves? Have a wonderful